I think we started.
Are we in?
So, yeah, we're in. So welcome everyone to the Facebook Live with myself and Josh Connolly. Thank you so much. Actually, I can't see if anyone's, just going to have a look. So we're going to be talking about shame this evening. And first of all, I'll just introduce myself and then I'll introduce Josh. So I'm a sex, love and relationship coach, and I support people who have had difficult childhoods and then support them to thrive in their adulthood. And Josh, I've invited Josh for a couple of reasons. So Josh is a life coach who is passionate about evoking change within people through the belief that we can all find a freedom from within when the right space is created. And Josh, I know that you've talked a lot about creating that right space. And in addition to Josh being a life coach, Josh is also a advocate for mental health awareness and an ambassador for the National Association for Children of Alcoholics. So great to have you, Josh. And the reason, welcome. So the reason why I wanted to talk about shame with Josh specifically is I know that you've spoken quite a lot about it on your social media. And also for myself personally, shame has deeply impacted my life. And it's something that it's been like a toxic impact in my life. And as I mentioned in the Facebook promotion for this Facebook Live, as Brené Brown says, there's 3 things that shame needs to grow and to keep going in the shame spiral, which is silence, secrecy, and judgment. So myself and Josh got together and we both were sharing how ourselves personally wanted to share some of our stories of shame, and I'm sure people who will be listening and tuning in will also have their own stories. And we wanted to share them as a way of going towards that, reducing the silence, the secrecy, and the judgment, so that we know that we're in this together. So the Facebook Live will be looking at sharing our stories a bit, myself personally and also Josh personally, about our experiences with shame, how it's deeply impacted our lives, the deep roots of shame from our childhoods or from Josh's childhood. And then we're also going to be looking at some of the defenses we've created through our storytelling around coping with shame, maybe like some of the unhealthy ways that we coped with shame. And then we're going to be sharing some tips and different ways that you can begin to change the relationship that you have towards your shame. So we're both very much hoping that people will come away from this Facebook Live hopefully feeling a little less silent about the shame that they feel, a little less secretive about the shame they feel, and a little less judgmental about the shame that comes up within themselves. So, Josh, I'd love to hear, first of all, a bit about your story around shame and the roots of the shame. Like we talked before, that there's certain points that you could pinpoint that as a child that caused this deep-rooted shame to happen within you that you then carried forward into and still carry in your life as an adult.
Yeah, I guess firstly it's important to mention that I never realised for the initial stages of my adult life, I never realised what shame was, and I certainly never realised it had any kind of impact on my life. I never link feelings of shame to my actions and the things that I was doing. But having done the work that I've done and looked at myself, I now realise the crippling shame that I felt when I was younger, as a result of what I went through with my dad, is huge in my life today. Or certainly had a huge hold on me before I started to look at myself. And the particular story that I remember from, with the greatest feeling of shame with my dad was, there was a particular time, it was summer, so it was a heat wave, and I was with my dad. I was about 8 years old, and we were walking through a park, so it was packed out full of families. literally hundreds of people in this field, and my dad was walking along urinating. I don't mean he was wetting himself. I mean he was walking along urinating. He was drinking from a big, bottle of cider, and I was walking about 10 yards in front of him. And I now realise the two things that I felt. One was guilt, and it was a guilt that I couldn't walk next to my dad in an act of defiance.
Yeah.
Despite the way my dad was, and despite the ways that he drank, and despite everything that came with that, he was my dad. Yeah, he was my only dad, and he was my hero, and I loved him dearly, just as much as anyone would love any father. And I felt guilty at 8 years old that I couldn't walk next to him in an act of defiance. I wanted to be able to stand next to my dad and let him know that I could protect him. And obviously that in itself is warped, right? And it's wrong that as an 8-year-old I wanted to protect the adult. But the second thing that I felt that was the most overwhelming was shame. And when I say shame, I don't mean I felt ashamed of my dad. I didn't feel ashamed of my dad. I didn't actually feel necessarily disgusted by my dad. Again, he was my hero. I loved him. I saw his pain. I felt shame. I felt like there was something inherently wrong with me. I felt like I was bad. I felt like everybody was looking at me, not my dad. And that was true often of the way my dad was. As a child growing up, the way my dad was and the experiences that he had as a result of the way that he was, I always felt like it was something wrong with me. I never connected it to my dad.
Yeah.
My dad had problems and what he struggled with, but I had deep feelings of being bad and like there was something wrong with me throughout my life as a result. And my dad died when I was 9 years old. So, these feelings, this feeling of shame that come about in these younger years, like Brené Brown says, shame says that I am bad.
Yeah.
And I know you talk a lot about the Brené Brown, the video, the YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Josh, for sharing that like deeply personal story. I remember when you first shared it to me before we were speaking. It was I could really feel like a strong response to how it must have felt for you as a young boy, and the shame that created. And I really appreciate your awareness now and your hindsight that at the time it wasn't shame that you felt, because as Brené Brown says, and as we've both come to learn, shame it's so insidious. It's we think we are bad rather than that we've done something bad. And this is something that I've really want to say over and over again. I have come to realize how important it is to recognize, and we can talk more about that at the end when we share some tips about how to deal with shame, is to recognize that when we're feeling shame, we're actually feeling that we are shame, that we are bad, not that we've done something bad and we've done something wrong, that we are bad and that we are wrong. So it can take over our whole being, this sense of shame, and it can leave us feeling in despair. It can leave us feeling really isolated. It can leave us feeling empty, and ultimately it can leave us feeling like we're not worthy of being loved or even liked by people, and that we aren't worthy of belonging. So all of those feelings together make shame like a really powerful emotion to feel, that can really take a hold of us and overwhelm us. So I just wanted to say, actually, just mindful, did you want to share it with your Facebook page? Did you have a chance to share it on your Facebook page?
I've done it, haven't I?
I don't know.
I have shared it. I'm sure I have.
Let me have a look.
That's I have.
Oh, great. And then with the other groups that you wanted to share it with?
Yeah, I've done it.
Fantastic. So I'd love to hear a bit more about some of the ways like it impacts your life now. So you've shared like the roots of your shame, and this really poignant moment in your life as a child where you can remember that that's where some of the shame would have come from. And I'd love to hear now how shame comes up in your life now, in your everyday today life, and then I can share a bit about something that happened to me that felt shameful for me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, like when it's important, I guess, to say as well, when it manifests itself in my life today, it's not this like thing that just pops up in my life where I'm like, oh, I feel shame. You know,
Yeah.
my mind and myself, my character presents it to me in various different ways. You know, for a long time, certainly in my late teens, I had a real strong feeling that people were going to find out.
Wow.
And now, if I said that to people, people would say to me, "Are going to find out what?"
Yeah.
And now I didn't know the answer, but I felt like a fraud.
Yeah.
Because for me, when I was younger, the shame was so bad and it was so hard to handle. I had to detach from myself because it was too painful to be part of my body, to be who I really was. It was too frightening,
Yeah.
too painful. So when I was growing up, it meant that I was able to do real outlandish things without any worry or any fear, because my detaching from myself because of such deep-rooted shame meant I became almost shameless because I completely detached.
Like omnipotent.
Yeah, exactly. But then today in my life, whenever I feel something that makes me feel shame, it takes me back. Now, I've learned a lot about implicit memory and the part of the brain that remembers the emotion and remembers the feeling. And so even a small thing of shame will cripple me today because like a silly example I use is when I'm going to do a talk somewhere, if I'm drinking a coffee in the car, I will wear a different t-shirt because the fear of getting something down my shirt, right, even just a small thing on my shirt, frightens the hell out of me. And for a long time, I thought it was because I was big-headed. I thought I must be big-headed, right? I must be arrogant because I want to look great all the time, yeah?
Which actually is another way of shaming ourselves, isn't it?
Shaming ourselves,
that internal judgmental voice.
Exactly. There must be something wrong with me, yeah? But the reality is I've always been terrified of shame. And so a small feeling of shame, like I say, I'm the 8-year-old boy looking at the world, looking at me. And silly things like I went out with my wife for our anniversary recently, and I ordered a lamb curry, and they brought me a chicken one, right? And my wife said, "Well, we'll just tell them, and they'll change it." And I couldn't do it, and it was because I couldn't bring myself to. I was worried that if he said, you know, if he tried to argue with me, then it was going to cause shame, and then he might find out. I was always worried about this finding out thing.
Yeah.
And then so I go the other way and I'm telling him how much I'm happy that he bought me chicken instead of lamb, you know? So ultimately what it does is it means that the person that I show up as in the world it cannot be the authentic me. Fear of shame can make me run away from the person that I really am.
Wow.
And ultimately that means that any relationships or bonds that I make throughout the day are not based on who I am. They're based on who I've presented to the world in fear of shame. And so that causes all kinds of problems within your life as, you know, as you try and find yourself and become your authentic self. You're presenting different people to the world all the time.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense, and I can really relate to this not showing up as the authentic self. And although it's like quite a jovial example of the curry, actually it's not, because what's going on for you is deep rooted, and as you said, it's bringing up. You're going back to that implicit memory, and can be frightening, it can be painful and isolating. When we show up in the world, we really want to be ourselves, but something is stopping us because we have these defenses in place to stop us from feeling that like overwhelming, painful shame. So it's a really good example actually about how your example of the curry, how it can show up in everyday things that we're doing on a daily basis, and all those things add up to create a sense of struggle and tension within us.
Yeah, and discussed it yourself, and because although it seems quite, like you say, quite trivial, and at the time it was, and to be honest, because we'll get onto it, but because I'm different in my life today, it didn't get a hold of me. But in the past, I would go home disgusted with myself. I would sit, when I got home and I'm alone in bed at night, I'd be thinking how weak I was and how sad it was that as a grown man, I can't even tell someone that what I've ordered is wrong. Do you know what I mean? And
wow.
So although it's quite a trivial thing, when you have that up to 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
exactly.
10 a day, then at night I was just disgusted. I felt weak. Yeah. And of course I hit it.
And playing over like what I've done in the past is I'll then repeat this like movie of I said this and why did I say that, and I did this and why did I do that, and like you said, you've got 9 things built up from the day, which is a big black cloud of shame at the end of the day. So what I absolutely really appreciate about what you're sharing right now is that you're speaking it out. You're making sure that this isn't silent and secret. And then the third part with the judgment is, it sounds like you're being kinder towards yourself, so that when it comes up, you're not lying in bed at night saying to yourself, "Oh, Josh, couldn't you just ask for the chicken curry or the lamb?" It sounds like you have a much kinder voice towards yourself now when it comes up.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been part of what I have to do. It's stepping aside from it, and sometimes I'll almost have a bit of a laugh at myself because it's still there. I'd be lying if I said, I've overcome shame and I don't feel shame anymore. It's the same as a lot of these things. Anxiety is the same. I don't not feel anxiety anymore. I haven't defeated anything in that way. Today I feel like I'm winning because of how I live in spite of it, and what I do with it, and how I take it, and how I allow myself to interpret it, and the impact it has on me. And I don't allow it to have such a hold on me anymore, as much as possible.
So I just want to let you know that Sarah has said, "Well done for sharing. Being honest like this will help many young people experiencing this in their lives now."
Oh, that's good. Thanks. Yeah. Who said that, Sarah?
Sarah, it's lovely to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sarah.
And when I started doing this, and I realized the power in the vulnerability of sharing, like I've found an ability to do. I spent the first 25 years before I went on a journey of healing. I spent the first 25 years trying to be a tough guy, trying to be hard, trying to be a man, trying to be strong, right? And for me, this is the toughest, strongest thing as a man that I can do, which is lay myself bare in front of people and say, this is who I am. This is who I've dared to be my most authentic self in today's life. And
wow, absolutely. I'm sure that's why so many people engage with you and respond to you. It's and that's why I really wanted to speak with you, because you really talk about these things that you grapple with in a public way, so that people can feel less alone. So I just wanted to share a story as well about my own shame, just so I can relate to you around this feeling of shame. So I was having a think, and it was a while back, and it used to be when I was doing some social work, and I used to sit in family in team meetings in our family support team, and I literally would be having all of these signs of stress and panic and come over me physically. I would be like, my hands would be sweating, my armpits would be sweating, my cheeks would be flushed, and And all of this was through absolute like fear, maybe even like terror is a strong word, but it's how I felt, that when it was coming round to my turn to speak and share an update of what I had been up to that week, I was just terrified. I was terrified of being seen. I was terrified of speaking. And what was underneath that fear was, am I going to say something that's wrong? Am I going to then be punished and sacked, or be completely, it's kind of similar to what you were saying, like being afraid of the response of being shamed. So so outwardly, I was presenting as someone who was calm, collected, maybe even making a few jokes, joining in with the conversations. But inside, I was literally having an internal battle, because I was saying, oh God, don't go red, don't go red. And I was kind of like praying in a way, like, please don't go red, because if they see that I'm going red, then they'll know that I'm ashamed. And being seen as shame is even more shameful. So I just really vividly remember like what a struggle it was to sit in that team meeting every week when the team meetings happened, and that fear of when it's going to come around to my turn, and just how much effort and energy went into managing my own internal states and responses, and just the relief that would happen when I would come out of the team meeting knowing that it was all over. It just felt like such an ordeal. So I kind of wanted to share that, just to show like a different side of shame as a story, and also to show the physical signs that can happen when we start to feel shame, as well as the mental voices that we get.
Yeah, and that will resonate a lot with people, and because certainly like when I remember when I was at school, when I was a teenager, and I would feel deeply shamed within lessons. I really struggled with that same feeling that you're on about, which was, you know, real physical sensations, the feeling in my chest, the tightness in my chest, the shakiness in my arms. Yeah, it would come out of me as anxiety, my fear of the shame. Yeah, but I would react to that with anger, and so I would hide it, because I wouldn't want anyone to feel like I was shamed. Like struggling with shame and struggling with that. And I didn't even know it was shame. But when I presented it as anger in a lesson, and people were saying to me, you know, all this thing about you've got problems with anger and anything that they used to say, to me it was better, because I used to think, if only you knew. People would insult me, and I used to think, if only you knew. And because my mind thought, you might be calling me that, but I'm 10 times worse. Yeah?
Wow.
I'm 10 times worse than that. So it was almost like when you called me an angry teenager who was naughty and all that kind of stuff, I'd have bit your arm off to have been that, because what I felt was much worse. So
and that's that internal judgmental voice again, isn't it? You know, if only you knew, I'm 10 times worse. And I'm glad you said, you just reminded me, because in those team meetings, I didn't know I was feeling shame. I thought that's me. I didn't know it was a feeling I was having. I just thought, well, this is life. This is normal. This is what you go through when you're having a team meeting. Although on some level, I kind of knew that it wasn't normal, because I was kind of fascinated how other people could sit there and look like they weren't struggling like I was. But how, I don't know what they were feeling inside.
Yeah, and that's what we do when people don't talk about that, the physical sensations and the internal feelings like you just did. When people don't talk about that, we go about judging ourselves, measuring ourselves up against how people look on the outside. Yeah, we measure up how we feel on the inside against that. And like you said, despite everything you were feeling in them meetings, you probably looked very similar to how you look sat there now. Yeah, because it was all inside. It's all internal, and you're fighting it and you're hiding it. So we're all looking at each other, thinking, well, everyone else in here is doing all right, and look at me struggling.
Absolutely.
The reality is, and this is, I mean, not to go too off course, but when we talk about mental health in general, and we tell people that they should talk, and the only reason people don't talk is because of stigma, I don't necessarily see that as being the reality. The reality is, all of us as people need to become more comfortable in discussing how we're feeling, physically and internally, because when we do that, then you create spaces for other people. I mean, imagine in a meeting if somebody said to you, cool, I'm feeling really like this internally, and I'm not looking forward to the day. I mean, you instantly would have come down a level, and actually would
I
have,
wish.
comments like that would have changed your world. Yeah, that is
Yes.
the reality. Not just your meeting, it would have changed the world.
Wow, that's so great. That's so poignant. Not just the meeting, it would have changed my world. It's so
Yeah,
true. And actually, I do remember a year or so later after that incident, I went into another office space, and a man sat down next to me. He said, "Oh God, I'm feeling really anxious right now. I've got something coming up." And I was gobsmacked. I was genuinely like, "Oh, you can tell people what you think and feel."
yeah.
So it was shocking because I had kept it all so hidden and secret. So I'd love to share a quote here, which is from the Big Red Book. And for anyone who tunes in who grew up around a parent's addiction to alcohol or drugs, you might have already read this book, or you might want to get this book. It's known as the Big Red Book, and it's called Adult Children of Alcoholics. And so the quote is, "Through the first 18 years of our lives, our families had 6,750 days to shame, blame, belittle, ignore, criticize, and manipulate us during the most formative years of our being. That is 160,000 hours of living in dysfunction with unhealthy parenting. That is 72 seasons of sorrow stored deeply in the tissues of our bodies." And the reason why I wanted to read it out and bring it into this around shame is because, going back to your story at the beginning, Josh, this incident that happened when you were a child, and I know myself as well, there's different incidents I can recall from childhood where I felt shame, and it builds up over time. And so there's that. Why I wanted to say is to be aware and acknowledge that it can really build up over time, and also that we can be kind to ourselves as we go on this journey of healing our relationship with our shame, and know that it can take us some time, because we have so many years of unraveling around it and unlearning that we aren't inherently bad or wrong.
And shame has a way of not allowing us to be nice to ourselves. One, because we don't think we deserve it, and we feel almost selfish when we give ourselves time or any kind of value. And in a way, when as a child, for me, the ways I reacted to the ways that I felt, I acted out a lot at school, and I was often asked by adults, teachers, especially teachers, "What's wrong with you, Josh? What's wrong with you?" Yeah, and I've always said, at 12, 13, I had no idea what was wrong with me, right? But what I took from the question is that there was something wrong with me.
Oh.
So the shame come from my experiences.
Yeah.
I acted out my experiences, as in I acted out the ways that I felt because I couldn't articulate them.
Yeah.
And then people ask me what's wrong with me. And so when you're a child, you're influenced by what these adults say to you. And when they said these things, "What's wrong with you?" You know, I used to sit there trying to figure out what's wrong with me. And when
it's
you
kind of
don't,
the worst question.
Yeah, it should be what's happened to you. You know.
I was going to ask you what is the good question, because what's wrong with us is already got that negative connotation. So I was going to ask you, so what's better? What's happened to you?
Well, and also curiosity. So I would get that feeling that you used to get in the meeting.
Yeah.
As a child, sat in a classroom, and it would get too much for me, so I would attention seek first, and then get told off for that, and then I would cause a stir and get thrown out of the lesson. Nobody ever took me a day later when things had calmed down and said, "Josh, let's talk about the build-up. Let's talk about what happened from the moment you walked through the classroom door to what happened in the moment you kicked off." Because for me, what happened was I was okay with chaos. I was used to chaos. I was hypervigilant when there was chaos, and it gave me something to focus on. Yeah. So when we're in the playground, we're running around, we're acting crazy, I'm center of attention, I've got everybody's attention, I'm in control. We get in the classroom, it carries on until 2 minutes in, then it's everybody be quiet, it's time to listen now. I would sit at the back not to be away from the teacher, but because I felt anxious if people were behind me. And then I would start to feel shame.
Yeah, and there's all these signals. I mean, we're going off topic here, and maybe it's something else we could do. It's around young people, and I know that you're really passionate about it, around changing the conversations and opening up the dialogue so that people can ask young people the right kind of questions and show curiosity. And it's such a great question. What happened before? What was the build-up? Because 99% of people aren't being naughty for naughty's sake. They're acting out something. Their behavior is showing some suffering that's going on internally within them. So I love that example as well. So it would be great to hear, and then we can have time for questions and answers if anyone who's joining us wants to share their thoughts or ask us any questions. And also someone's put here, post the details of Red Book, so I will do afterwards. I'll post the details. So it would be great now for us both to share some of the things that have helped you, and I'll share one of the things that's helped me in changing the relationship to the shame and embracing it, and supporting ourselves with love and compassion and care.
Yeah, okay, well, the first and ultimate one for me that I always say for dealing with shame and our reaction to shame and everything else actually in general is routine. For me, it has to be like steadfast routine that you get into the habit of doing regularly. There has to be an understanding that if you do it for 3 days, there won't be an impact. You need to do this for a time. And I do routine. So in the morning, I make sure I do movement and mindfulness. I get up at 5:30 every morning and go to bed at 9:30 at night. Half time every day. Apart from Wednesday at the moment because The Apprentice is on telly. But that's for another chat. But and in the morning, I get up, I get my body moving, and then within 40 to 50 minutes of movement, for me it's at the gym, and then I look for 20 to 40 minutes of mindfulness, which I've built up over time, by the way. It started off as 2 minutes. Which in reality,
okay, that's really good to know. So people listening, I think it's really handy to know, like, don't start off with like 50 minutes because that can seem like totally unachievable. But the 2 minutes you can start off with.
And it's like anything, right? If you're going to run the London Marathon, you don't get on a treadmill and run 24 miles straight away. You get on and you run what you can, and then you push yourself, and then you push yourself. And gradually over time, it gets better and better. But I've learned mindfulness has changed my life. Undoubtedly, regular mindfulness has changed my life. And for me, when I started doing it, it was a series of doing it having an impact on my life. And then everything was okay, so I didn't need to do mindfulness. And then things would deteriorate again, and then I would start it again until I finally realized I need to be doing this all the time. And through that, I've learned about body scans. So the physical sensations that we talked about, for me, most of my struggles, my fears, and my worries present themselves to me physically first. They probably present themselves in other ways first, but I spot them first physically normally through body scans. So if I've got tension in my neck and my headaches, when I get headaches, my headaches are caused by stress, by tension. When I'm struggling with something in my marriage, in my relationship with my wife, it's normally in my stomach. I don't eat, or I have troubles with eating. And then worry and concern is often in my chest, that real anxiety feeling. Regular body scans for me help me find that. And the reason why routine is so important, to make sure that you do it all the time, is because when I'm triggered by something, I detach from myself. And when I start to feel too much pain, I don't realize I'm in it. Okay, and the changes are quite subtle, but they can have big impacts on my life, the ways that I start acting. And if I'm falling into a routine of healing nature in the same way that I fall into having my breakfast, then I am automatically healing myself as a result, because it's something I do every day and it's part of my daily routine. So it's vital and it's huge for me. So I can't get enough routine.
It's so great. And when you first said this to me, I was blown away. It's the simplicity of it, and the what you're building in is a mechanism or a way to track your physical sensations, to track how you're doing internally every day, and then to be able to notice. And when you were sort of just sharing about your first tip for people listening, which is routine, I was thinking, and you were saying that you get like a tension in your headache, or if it's a relationship issue in your stomach, anxiety around your chest. I think that, myself included, we're in such a constant state of stress, anxiety, and shame that we don't even know that we've got a headache. It's just like a permanent headache or permanent signs of stress in our chest or stomach. So what I love about the routine is it's kind of saying, actually, no, this isn't normal.
Yeah,
it's allowing us to track it and go, oh wow, so I've had like a stomach thing every day this week, and to notice that and see where we can support ourselves even more.
Yeah, and it gives you it allows you to clear your thoughts around all that. Yeah, because what we naturally do is we go, I'm worried about this, and I go, oh, but I've got to sort that. I can't worry about that at the moment, and then and we're all addicted to thought, so we're always all thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking. And so when you slow it down in the morning for that routine, it gives me space to feel stuff, and I will sometimes sit there and cry, and because I always thought you shouldn't feel bad, right? But there's things that happen in life that make you feel sad, that make you feel lonely or scared or worried, and as a man, as a human, I think, we don't. We have this idea that we shouldn't feel sad and bad and all that stuff, and my natural reaction to sadness is to run away and not feel it. So in the morning when I see it, I can do my mindfulness and I can have a bit of a cry, and then realize that when I'm sad, it makes me want to give myself a bit of a cuddle or the fetal position, that kind of stuff. And that's all right, and then when you do it, you've lightened your load when you go into the day. Yeah, you've got space. Then you can help other people. I can be a dad because I've emptied out my emotion, and I'm allowing some space now for my children to come in and share some of their emotions. Otherwise, I'm here all the time and I'm deflecting.
Amazing. So you're moving from here and you're coming into your body and you're allowing yourself to feel, which actually is a really tough and challenging thing to do, which is why routine is so important, because I think we live in a culture that doesn't encourage us to move into our body and encourage us to stay here, especially for most of us who are sitting at laptops all day. It's harder to come into the body. And I just want to say I felt a real sense of relief when you said that you put yourself into a fetal position and that you were then had made space to then be there for your family. That's really lovely to hear. We've got some comments. Vicky said, do more of this, please. Thank you. And we are all such nice people. It's a shame in itself that we don't feel like we're good enough or good enough to belong somewhere nice. This has been a real eye-opener. And again, she said, please post the details of the red book. And Sean also said, the dialogue you're describing, this was just before, automatically eliminates how the person is actually feeling. I think this was when you were saying, what's wrong with you? Yeah. So this automatically eliminates how the person is actually feeling. Yeah. So this sense of how I actually feel gets wired out of the developing brain. Wow. Yes, that's so true, Sean. And replaced by the presupposition that there is something wrong with me, and replaced with a shame response. So thank you, Sean. That's actually showing us like a negative feedback loop that can happen just from a simple, innocent question, like coming probably from a genuine, sometimes from a genuine space of care, and actually then the knock-on effect of asking the wrong types of questions. So I'd love to hear your number 2 in supporting yourself with shame around.
Well, the second one for me involves the ego, right? And so we often hear about how anything that involves the ego is bad, and that you've got to completely deflate your ego and get rid of your ego. And for me, it's not necessary. I use my ego to my advantage. Okay, so like when I talked about the shirt earlier, when I talked about I can't wear my shirt when I go out to do a talk and things like that. I now wear that. I wear my clothes like a suit of armor, yeah. And I recognize that I am quite fearful of the world. I am quite frightened of being around a lot of people, and that's okay. That's all right. And sometimes I need to just put on my armor and go get it and go play the game, and that's okay. I used for a time I tried to stop that. Yeah, I thought I need to be this like floating spiritual guy who doesn't care about what anybody thinks about
pretending,
him.
performing.
Yeah, performing, yeah. But the reality is that I'm not like that. I do worry about stuff like that, yeah. And rather than being like I need to stop feeling like this, I need to stop feeling like this, I embrace it, and then I use my ego to my advantage, and I put it on like a suit of armor, and I go and kick the nuts out of the world when I need to do it, yeah. But I'm empowered. I'm empowered by that. But what I am is aware of what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm not getting carried away or getting completely controlled by my ego.
Yes,
I'm aware and I'm using it. I'm in control and I'm owning it, and I think that's okay.
Yes, rather than it using you.
Rather than it using me. And when the ego runs wild, yeah, and we're just completely ego driven and all that kind of stuff, then you're into a whole different ball game, yeah. But for me, when I'm in control, yeah, and I'm not in denial, and I'm in the reality of what I'm doing, I can do what I want, right? And it's all right. It's all right. And I make mistakes and all that kind of stuff. But when I'm aware and I'm awake to it, then I'm winning, really.
It's fantastic. I really love that. So it's about having an awareness, and then purposefully using the suit of armor to protect you, because you have this awareness that you're fearful of the world sometimes, as am I. I'm totally aware sometimes I'm going into environments and I can feel this like fearfulness come up. And so I love your openness and honesty around sometimes you just got to put that suit of armor on, and this friendly, caring voice that you have towards yourself and to anyone that's listening. It's okay. It's okay to be afraid, and it's okay to wear the suit of armor sometimes. It doesn't mean that you're always performing. It just means that you're using it to your advantage to be out there in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and then the third one that I wanted to share, so we've shared Josh's tip so far, which is number 1, having a routine, and number 2, wearing a suit of armor. So the third one is actually kind of stripping it right back to the beginning, which is what you were saying, Josh, around your mindfulness. And it's recognizing the shame in the first place. I've just got Lara said, and to be able to laugh at ourselves is absolutely, we could say that's number 4.
We touched on it already, right?
Yeah.
That being able to laugh at ourselves when we realize the silly things we've done to protect ourselves.
Yeah, and it's a great way to diffuse all of the strong feelings that are overwhelming us or coming up. So yeah, thank you, Laura, that's a good one. So the third one from me is to recognize that it's shame that's coming up. So what you were saying, Josh, and what I was saying, because we feel that we are shame, it's so important to get a sense of distance between who I am as my authentic self and the shame part, that is all of these beliefs that I have taken on from childhood and from adulthood that's been imposed on me, my false self that I have built up over and over again through the years, through like wiring really in my brain, this strong pattern. So what's really helped me, particularly in the last couple of years, is to recognize the shame. And how I do that is I notice the physical sensations. So what happens actually is that shame can feel quite similar physically to a sense of panic. So like a tight chest, flush of the cheek, sweaty hands, etc. And the body is registering it as a threat and a sense of danger. So that's what's happening when I'm feeling shame or when we're feeling shame. So if I start to feel those physical sensations, then that's telling me, oh, something's going on here. And then the thoughts will come in, or vice versa, the thoughts might come, and then I'll be aware of the physical sensations. So really the third step is to either track your physical sensations or track the thoughts. Notice that it's shame. And again, what's really helped me is giving it a name. So I call it the shame monster, or you could call it the shame gremlin. And oh, hello, shame monster, it's you again, you're here again. And just with loving, open arms, like welcoming it, like not pushing it away, like you said, Josh, saying it's okay. Like, I understand where you come from, and I understand why you're here now, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And so that really helps to, because I wrote a quote here actually. It really helps, like, actually recognizing shame. So the quote here I've got, just found it online, is that toxic shame is like a creature that thrives on hiding in the darkness under a rock. Not until we turn that rock over and expose it to a big dose of sunlight is it going to begin to shrink away. And hopefully, in effect, that's what we're doing right now. We're turning some light onto shame, both with ourselves and hopefully people that listen to this.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think we all, not all, but lots of us have felt the feeling of toxic shame. You know, there's obviously healthy shame, which we ain't got enough time to go into today. But that we have, so that we have boundaries, so that we know our limitations and things like that. But this, this deep-rooted feeling that you talked about, that when you can name it and separate yourself from it, rather than feeling like terrible, you can step aside and realize that you're having a feeling of that's terrible, rather than I feel terrible.
Great. Yeah, that's such a great, really important distinction. And Sophie says, I think we have to be, I really love what Sophie's saying here. She said, I think we have to be careful when we use humor, though. So I love what Lara said, like, laughter's really good. And then what Sophie's saying is, sometimes when we use humor, we want to ensure we don't deny our feelings by dismissing them through humor. So empathy first, then humor is what this is what Sophie's saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love that balance of humor, and also sometimes it's not appropriate.
Yeah, anything we do to cover up, to not stare in the face,
that's
or
good,
to turn it around, like what you said, play acting, anything that we do like that is going to have the adverse effect, isn't it? And and the thing with this kind of thing is we're all very, very good at tricking ourselves and playing the role and denying the truth, because it's hard to look at. It's scary to look at,
Yes.
It's scary to accept that truth. So we run from it and we create, diversion tactics. And humor would definitely be an obvious diversion tactic. I used it a lot, and I'll quickly say this: I lost a lot of my humor when I first started my healing journey, because I'd used humor so much.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that I only associated it with trying to make people like me. Yeah, because I found my place in the world by making people like me. And then so when I went on this healing journey and I realized that it was like an unhealthy thing, I went for like a year and a half where I almost had no humor whatsoever, because I thought it was just something that I used. And gradually over time, I've allowed it to come back, but that's been a journey as well.
I've actually heard, I spoke to someone recently who also said that they stopped using humor for a year because it was a diversion tactic or a way of avoiding the painful stuff that was coming up. So that's really helpful. And Lara said, we have to undo what we learned through our lives to build who we really are. Absolutely.
Yeah. And there is a book, isn't there? Someone wrote a book about how adulthood is just undoing all the things.
Oh, that's so true.
that adults taught you that that knew nothing themselves when they taught you it, or whatever the saying is. But have you ever seen any of Jim Carrey's stuff that he says? The comedian?
No, but I love Jim Carrey.
Yeah, have you listened to him talk about this kind of stuff? I
have actually. I do.
Yeah,
he's got some great stuff.
A lot about daring to be, or daring to present your most authentic self to the world.
Wow.
It changed my life when I did it. It was a big step, and it was scary, and still is scary when I bump into people that I knew that haven't seen me since I became my most authentic self. Yes. And actually, the reaction 99.9% of the time is good. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's one of respect and people are impressed by it. So,
and that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes we're afraid of responses that we don't have evidence for.
Yeah.
Externally, actually, people are being kind. People are, responding to us nicely most of the time. Hopefully, depends what kind of environments we're in. And often, actually, our greatest internal critic and judger is us.
Yeah. Look, when I first started doing all this stuff, it's when I first started with NACOA, started doing charity work, and I started having people thanking me for it or praising me for it. In the end, I had to say to myself, right, for the next X amount of months, every time someone says thank you or congratulates you for your good work, just say thank you.
Yes.
And take it, right? See if you can take it. Just receive it. Don't go, oh, thank you, you're brilliant too. Don't do that. Or don't go, thanks, but it's not really me. I'm just doing it. Just say thank you. It's really nice to hear. I had to do that for about a year before it stopped making me feel sick.
Wow. So I'm mindful of time. I think if anyone's got any questions or any more thoughts, we've kind of actually been doing it naturally as we go along. So thank you so much to everyone who has been sharing their comments. Oh, we actually had someone here saying way back on routine, interesting, as oddly I've resisted routine for years. And then someone else said, Josh, once again, your honesty is amazing, and this has been an eye-opener. You must do more of this. So thank you so much, everyone, for your comments.
Is there questions? I'm happy to answer them if there is. I don't know if you've anywhere to be.
I think another comment, receiving is very hard. Yep, that's very true. And Sean said, do you think that in accepting ourselves authentically, this is what the world then reflects back to us? Oh, that's such a great question.
Oh, that's a discussion in itself.
It is.
Because in one way, the answer is yes. But in another way, I wonder how ready the world is for us all to present ourselves.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. But that is kind of like another discussion on authenticity.
Yeah.
And what we do.
But certainly, when I've become my most authentic self, then the world has presented me with something completely different.
Wow,
that's been my experience.
So there is a chain reaction that Sean is alluding to.
Yeah, well, absolutely. For me, yeah, totally.
And Laura has actually said, "Oh, that's such a great question. I love the questions. How are you feeling now? Speaking about this."
How do I feel now?
Yeah.
So I've sweated quite a bit. I haven't sat still the whole time. But I feel all right. Yeah, I feel all right. When I first started speaking publicly, obviously I did quite a lot of stuff with NACOA that was like televised and things like that. And people kept saying to me, "Look after yourself," and I was like, "Why?" But what I started getting poorly, started getting really bad. My headaches were really bad again. I was going off on moments of detaching from myself. And so when I publicly speak about it, and I do like an hour and a half talk, and it's quite intense, and I go right into the real details of what happened when I was younger, I relive it every time. And so I do have a process that I go through every time to allow myself to feel everything. Because when I'm doing it live, you can't feel it all properly. Otherwise, I'd be stood up there just crying for an hour, which is like nobody's coming to see that. So I have to hold it together a certain amount. But then normally on my way home, I will allow myself the space to let the feelings and the emotions come out. And my evening routine will always reground me.
Great. That's why that routine, that number one, is so important. And myself, Lara, how I'm feeling about it, I was actually feeling like nervous beforehand, the pressure of doing it live and Similarly to Josh, I've also been a bit sweaty, and also similarly, it's actually felt really good. I felt comfortable talking with Josh, and I've actually felt quite grounded as well. And I think quite a lot of that is to do with similarly my routine things that I have in place that keep me in a centered space within my body. So
I've also become very good at letting go of what people think.
Yes.
And I am in a much closer to living a life where I genuinely, because when you do become your most authentic self, when you really do just lay it all out there, there's actually nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide anymore.
What a relief!
And so it's freeing. So
yes.
So I am very much when I do a talk, I never ever plan what I'm going to say. I just think I'll throw it out there and then let go of what comes to pass from that, you know.
And Sophie also said, how can you say something about loneliness? How being authentic can be a lonely path, and that's been her experience. I mean, personally, yeah, totally. Like when I step more and more into myself, then other people's reactions, depends, you know, who it is around me, because they're used to me being a certain way, then it's kind of a bit of a shock that I'm actually becoming a different person in their eyes.
Yeah, totally. And you get so many different reactions, right? You get, I'll get people say to me, "You don't feel like that." And when I say I'm a bit shy, and you're not shy, you don't struggle with your confidence, and then you also get the where society will push certain ideals on you.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it can become a lonely place. Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have a lot of friends, right? And I say that with a smile because I'm okay with it. I don't need. I used to need loads telling me I'm a good crack all the time. Yeah, but no, being your most authentic self, it's not easy, because if it was, everyone would be doing it, right? And,
exactly.
And like you say, when you go, I changed completely. Yeah. And my role in other people's lives was taken away. So a lot of people lost someone, you know?
Yes.
That's the reality too, is my family, friends, they lost the Josh that I was when I was 20, 21 is gone. It doesn't exist. Yeah. So it's no wonder some people feel like I'm being a bit of a fraud now, because I was a fraud for so long.
Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us and for your comments. And thank you so much, Josh, for joining me on this Facebook Live.
I think we should do it again, right?
Absolutely. I'm thinking the same. Let's do one on authenticity, one on something else.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
You could look at doing one a month or something, you know?
Absolutely. So yeah. I'm going to post in the comment section below if you want to get in touch with Josh, maybe with his live coaching or with the other stuff that he does. I'll put that in the link below to his social media. I'm always
really active on all my social media videos and posts and all that kind of stuff.
And I'll post a link to the Big Red Book that someone asked for as well. And so just to recap, Josh and we shared some of our personal stories around the shame that we feel, and we're talking about this subject. We talked about it because the things that shame needs to thrive is silence, secrecy, and judgment. So we wanted to be open about it and for people to walk away feeling a little less silent, a little less secretive, and a little less judgmental of themselves. And then we looked at some of the deep roots that happen in childhood that cause us to build up these layers of shame and toxic shame within us. And then some of the defenses that we've put in place to stop people from knowing that that's what's going on internally. And then Josh and I shared 3 ways that you can support yourself to deal with shame, which is number 1, having a routine. Number 2, sometimes choosing to wear a suit of armor. And number 3, actually recognizing that it is shame coming up, that we are not shame, it's shame that is coming up. So thank you everyone so much for listening, and yeah, we'll probably do another one sometime soon.
It's coming.
Yeah.